I hope this is enough. Louise held out a bag of gold to the man. Sure, come on in, lady. Have a good time. You should go to the end of the hall, replied the man. Oh, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. But then again, he's the one who told me to have a lover. You have to listen to your husband, Louise thought as she walked down the hallway. Entering the room, Louise saw a man in a mask. He told the girl that he had been waiting for her for a long time. I came here because I was promised the best gigolo in the country, Louise explained. Initially, Louisa did not want to have a lover. She loved her husband Laird and was faithful to him. Hearing that Laird had returned to the manor, Louise ran out to meet him. Louise, how are you? It's good to see you in good health. Say hello, this is our new maid. Laird introduced the pretty blonde-haired girl to his wife. Louise looked at her in surprise. She didn't expect her spouse to bring home an unknown woman. She had her luggage stolen on the way to the capital. She had nowhere to stay, so I offered to stay with us for a couple of days. I couldn't leave the girl on the street all alone, explained Laird to his spouse. No, I'm winding myself up after all. Nothing terrible has happened. This girl was really in trouble, so the spouse did the right thing by inviting her into our home. She reminds me of me in the past. Louise calmed herself. The story of the new maid bothered her. Before her marriage, Louise had traded fresh fish in the market, so she knew what it was like to be stranded. One day, the girl's bucket of fish overturned and Laird helped to collect it. That day, the girl realized she had fallen in love with him. Yes, there have been hard times in my life, too. Laird is a very understanding man, and I believe he just couldn't pass by someone who was in trouble. I've been in a similar situation, so we need to take care of this girl. I believe that as soon as things get better for her, she will immediately leave our manor. Looking out the window, Louise saw Laird. He was tenderly embracing their new maid. Suddenly, Laird kissed the maid on the lips. "And what are you thinking about?" asked Laird to his spouse at breakfast. He acted extremely friendly, as if everything was fine. Why did Laird do this to me? Have I bored him? He keeps telling me he loves me. Louise thought over breakfast. Walking around the estate, Louise met Laird in the company of a new maid. The girl couldn't stand it and still asked her spouse why he was doing this. "Oh, Louise, you know I love you more than anyone else in the world, but let's respect each other's personal space. I want to enjoy it myself," asked the girl's spouse. Personal space? That's right. The prenup talked about freedom and personal space. However, I didn't expect that's what he meant. Surprised, the girl thought to herself. "Hey, who are you? Who sent you to me?" The gigolo exclaimed and unconsciously fell on top of Louise. His white shirt began to quickly become saturated with blood. "Hey, wake up! What's wrong with you?" Scared Louise shouted. When the man opened his eyes, he saw a girl with long silver hair in front of him. "I gave you first aid. Fortunately, the wound on your shoulder was not deep," Louise narrated. "You helped me?" surprised the gigolo. "I had no other choice. By the way, there turned out to be too little medicine here, so I did everything hastily. You should see a doctor to look at your wound as well." Louise replied, "My wounds are bandaged quite professionally. Not even knights can provide such quality medical care," thought the man, looking at the bandaged wounds on his body. Lowering his eyes, the man noticed that the hem of the girl's dress was torn. "You tore the hem of your dress to bandage me?" asked the gigolo. The girl answered him that she had to do so as there were no bandages at hand. How amusing all this is. You can tell she's from a noble family, but she tore her expensive dress to help me. The man thought and laughed merrily. "You had better not laugh or your wounds will reopen," warned Louise. "Thank you for saving my life. Forgive me for such harsh behavior," said the gigolo to the girl. "I am glad I was able to help you. Now I'm going to go. My husband should be back soon." Louise was embarrassed by the situation. "Aren't you curious about what happened to me?" the man asked. "Well, different situations happen. Take today, for example. I did something out of character for me, too, and I'd like to keep it a secret. I hope for your understanding," Louise replied. "Why do I feel like I've seen this man somewhere before?" Louise thought on the way home. It was raining a fine, nasty rain, and it made the girl feel even more abandoned and lonely. "I heard you came home all wet. The maid said that all your clothes were torn," said Layard to his consort. "Going outside, I didn't expect to be caught in a heavy downpour. Dragging wet clothes on me is too hard, so I had to get rid of some pieces of my dress," Louise replied. Layard remarked that his consort couldn't walk around town like that. "Did you do that because I forgot our anniversary? I want to remind you that when you suffer, I feel bad too. Answer me. At the moment you are not in any pain?" asked Layard. "There is nothing wrong with me. How are you?" Louise noted to herself that her husband smelled of feminine perfume. "I have an important banquet tomorrow. I guess that with Archduke Lindemann's return, high society will be in an uproar. The knights have already gone on a scouting mission, and several men have died." Narrated Layard. Suddenly, Louise remembered where she had seen a gigolo before. It was the Archduke Lindemann himself. Edward von Lindemann was the deposed heir. A year ago, he had gone on a reconnaissance trip to Perils, the so-called Forest of Death. The Archduke's expedition caused a stir in the capital. People were afraid of the dark forest called the Forest of Death. 80 years ago, a dragon was slain in this forest. Since then, strange things have been happening there. The wild beasts that lived there did strange things, and some even used magic. Most of the knights sent to scout the area were killed. Everyone knew that the emperor had decided to send the Archduke to the Forest of Death to die there. Edward Lindemann was the main thorn in his eye. Everyone was surprised when they found out that the Archduke still managed to survive. Not only did the Archduke survive, but he also retained most of his troops. "Most likely the Archduke got his injury in the forest," Louise guessed. "Are you even listening to me? I'm telling you that various turbulent situations may arise due to the Archduke's arrival, so be extremely careful. I would like to point out that there are rumors that the Archduke likes to hit on pretty girls." The Archduke seduces pretty girls and then uses them for his dark magic. I know that you are a very wise girl and would not get involved with a dangerous man, but still, I must warn you, said Louise to her spouse. Louise crossed paths with the Archduke several times at various banquets. He never paid any attention to her or even spoke to her. There was nothing to be afraid of. "Hello, are you the Countess Louise?" Edward asked with a cheerful smile. Layard looked at his consort in surprise. Did she and the Archduke really know each other? "Congratulations on your safe return, Archduke Lindemann," the Emperor said in a loud voice. Edward told the Emperor that he didn't expect such a lavish banquet in his honor. "Isn't it obvious? You have come a long way under my command. That's why I think this banquet is more fitting than ever," replied the Emperor. He was annoyed by the fact that the Archduke had returned to the capital unharmed. "Spies have told me that Lindemann was seriously injured in one of the battles. So why is he standing in front of me on his feet right now?" Irritatedly thought the Emperor. The current ruling emperor was Archduke Lindemann's half-brother. As soon as he fraudulently became the heir to the throne, he immediately began sending assassins to Edward. But each time, Edward survived. The Archduke recruited talented warriors and formed an army of knights. Instead of getting involved in political strife, he began to expand his influence through estate management and philanthropic endeavors. "Enjoy your impunity while you can. Believe me, I will definitely get rid of you," thought the Emperor, looking at his half-brother. "Congratulations, Archduke," said Count Layard Cloet to Edward. "I am surprised that you still managed to successfully return. Few return from the Forest of Death alive and unharmed. I am pleased to attend the banquet given in your honor. I do hope the Archduke will not tell my husband anything about our meeting. I agreed with him that we would keep everything secret. It is unlikely that Lejar will calmly accept the information that I still obeyed him and went in search of a lover." Louise thought, "Archduke Lindemann, I am honored to meet you. I congratulate you on your return," exclaimed Louise. It was necessary to pretend that they didn't know each other. "Laird, there you are!" joyfully exclaimed the red-haired girl who approached. "Hello, Liliana." With a smile, Laird replied to the girl. "Allow me to introduce you. This is Lady Liliana, a very recent entrant into Soviet circles." Layard introduced the red-haired girl to the Archduke. "Archduke, would you care to tell Lady Liliana the story of your expedition?" The situation was beginning to strain Louise, so citing her ill health, the girl hurriedly left. Louise saw her husband Laird holding Liliana's hand tightly, and it hurt her. "Would you mind if I escorted your consort to the terrace, if Madame Cloette doesn't mind?" Edward asked Laird. "This is the first time I've ever seen an Archduke escort someone." Surprised Laird. "I appreciate your kindness, but I shouldn't. I feel like taking a walk alone," replied Louise to the Archduke. "I can't believe such a tramp was invited to the banquet. Lieutenant, what are you doing here?" the Emperor's soldiers asked in surprise. "Please move aside. You're disturbing people," asked the lieutenant to the soldiers. "Is there really a fight coming? I just wanted to go home in peace. I want to leave this place as soon as possible," Louise thought to herself wistfully. Suddenly, the girl recognized her old friend Maxian in the lieutenant. "Louise, how did you end up at this banquet?" Maxian wondered. Louise told him that she had married a count and had been living in the capital for over 3 years. "And why is the Countess friends with this simpleton?" marveled the Emperor's soldiers. Everyone in the palace knew that Louise was born into a poor family. She became a countess only after her marriage. The girl was lucky. She married Count Cloette, one of the Emperor's retainers. "I recently heard that you've made good progress in your career. You are now a member of the Order of Knights. The other day, you were appointed deputy captain. Those are good achievements," noted Louise. "You must have traveled to perils. How are things going there?" asked the girl, to which Maxian replied to her that nothing had changed at home. Everything was as good as before. "Since you and I have finally met, and you know who I have become at this point, you can visit me at the manor now. I'm sure my husband won't mind," Louise exclaimed. "There you are, Maxian, and I've been looking all over the palace for you," said the Archduke, who approached. "Madam, to avoid misunderstandings, I want to warn you at once that I did not follow you, and I was just looking for Maxian," said the Archduke to Louise. "If you move so vigorously, your wound will begin to bleed again," in a quiet voice, Louise warned. "You've been pretending all evening tonight that you and I don't know each other, but I can see that you're obviously worried about me," Edward remarked. Louise told Maxian again that she was glad to see him and hurriedly excused herself. "I see you and the Countess are good friends," said Edward to his subordinate Maxian. The lieutenant replied to him that he had known Louise since she was a child. He didn't expect her to be able to marry the Earl of Cloette. "Maxian, you're going on duty tomorrow, aren't you? I heard you were going to Cloette Manor. You said nothing suspicious has been seen of the Countess. Tell me what she is like?" Edward asked his subordinate and loyal pal Maxian. "It is rather difficult for me to talk about her right now. The thing is, the last time we saw each other was about 10 years ago," replied Maxian. "I remember that she was always kind, something like you. She's contentedly open and sympathetic. I find her company very easy to be in. In any case, don't let your guard down, even if you're very happy to meet her. The Cloette family is quite loyal to the Emperor's circle. We can't be sure that the Countess won't start acting to our detriment," Edward warned his mate. "I should be extremely careful of my surroundings. For several years now, the Emperor has continued to send assassins to me. Even when I was in perils, he never gave up hope of killing me," Edward thought to himself. "On the last day, I was betrayed by my close comrade, so I was wounded. It was then that I met the Countess. Is she also in cahoots with the Emperor? Although I didn't notice anything suspicious in the reports, I'm not sure if she can be trusted. The Count's wife doesn't fit into high society at all. She doesn't look like a noblewoman. To dress my wounds, and she tore her skirt without a second thought. I'm sure it's not the first time she's done it. What's a lady like that doing around Laird? The Imperial gang is clearly up to something. I am firmly convinced that the Countess recognized me, but she tried very hard not to show any sign of it. And I remember that night she asked me to keep it a secret. She must be afraid of her husband's reaction. Madame, I hear you're expecting a guest. How do you like this dress? If you want, we can try on something else, said Louise to her maid. No, this dress is absolutely gorgeous. Something like it I wore many years ago, replied Louise. Hearing the clatter of hooves, Louise jumped outside. Louise, I'm glad you invited me to visit, exclaimed Maxian upon seeing the girl on the doorstep of the manor. I'm so glad you came to see me. There is so much I want to tell you. Louise motioned for her mate to follow her into the house. I didn't know what you like to eat now, so I thought I'd treat you to a good old-fashioned apple pie, said Louise. Maxian was pleased that the girl had catered to his tastes. I would like to point out that you have grown a lot since the last time we met. You are no longer a boy now, but a mature man. But your character hasn't changed at all. You are the same as when you were a child. By the way, how did you get into the Order of Knights? Louise asked. On my way back, I accidentally ran into the Archduke's estate. Fortunately, he accepted me into his ranks, replied Maxian. I'm glad things have gotten better in your life. You seem much happier now, smiled, the girl said. And how are you? Are you and your husband getting along? Asked Maxian. Of course, I was lucky enough to meet a decent man. Count Layard is a decent husband, replied Louise. Talking about her spouse had been giving her a very hard time lately. Shall we go for a walk? We have a very beautiful garden. I want to show it to you, Louise suggested. In this way, she hoped to change the subject. If she continued to talk about her husband, Maxian might guess that all was not well in her marriage. Since it started raining heavily, Louise and Maxian had to take shelter in the gazebo. I feel like I'm a child. Even though my clothes are soaked, I'm still having fun, Louise said with a smile. It feels good to be here with you, too. Even in this rain, there's a special charm to it. By the way, is Mr. Grimm in the capital, too? Maxian asked. No, he is dead. He passed away 5 years ago, replied Louise. It must have been hard for you alone after his death, noted Maxian. When I escaped, I thought I had finally gotten out of the cage, but I found myself in another, more beautiful one. You know, Maxion, I'm going through a very difficult time right now, and the worst part is that I'm the only one who can fix it, Louise admitted. Edward decided to go to the Earl of Cloet's estate. Thank you for visiting me. We had a great time with you. Be careful on your way home, Louise asked her mate, Maxian. Promise me that if there is trouble in your life, you will be sure to tell me about it, asked Maxian. Layard walked into the house. Layard, I want you to meet my childhood friend, Maxian. Louise introduced the buddy to her husband. It's a pleasure to meet you. I was about to leave, but I was lucky enough to meet you, said Maxian and shook the Count's hand. It's a pity you're already leaving. Next time we'll definitely have dinner together, said the Count. Louise and Layard went outside to see their guest off. Suddenly, they saw a carriage pulling up. Archduke Linderman stepped out of the carriage. Him again? Layard thought irritably. Maxian, I came here for you. I was worried it would rain again, and you were without an umbrella. Since I was in the neighborhood, I decided to get a carriage for my precious companion. It is not proper for you to ride. The Archduke patted Maxian on the shoulder. The rain is long over and the sky is clear. It is clear to a fool that it will not rain again. He came here for an entirely different reason. Louise guessed. Lady, I saw a beautiful garden on my way here. I hope that someday you will invite me to your estate too, said the Archduke to Louise. We don't live a very luxurious life, but as soon as we have the opportunity, we will definitely invite you, promised the Archduke Layard. My dear Louise, I don't think you should associate with such dishonest people as the Archduke and his buddy, said Layard to his wife. I know that Maxian is your mate, but he is a traveling commoner. You should be careful with him. Besides, you're a countess now. But Layard... Louise really wanted to remind her husband that he himself was taking commoners unknown to her into their house. Yes, and she had been a common commoner in the past. When Louisa married Laird, he asked her to forget her maiden name. The Count didn't want people to avoid his wife. He asked the girl not to tell anyone about her origins. Louise realized that her spouse was embarrassed by her past. He cared absolutely nothing about what the girl really wanted. Maxian is my only friend, but if you don't like him, I'll try to stay away from him, Louise promised. Look, I think you've gotten bored lately. Why haven't you considered my suggestion of having a lover yet? You have to relax somehow, Laird exclaimed. Louise froze in place, but decided not to argue with her spouse. If she started to say anything to him now, they would surely have a fight. At the moment, she didn't want to ruin the peace that was in their home. All right, since you insist, I'll get myself a lover, Louise agreed. Imagine, my friend's husband suggested she have a lover, told Maxian to his buddy Edward. And how did she react to that? Asked Edward. She asked me where it would be best for her to get a lover, and clarified if it would be better to look at a gigolo. But I have absolutely no help for her in that matter. I am at a loss at the moment, Maxian complained. I wish I could advise her not to listen to her husband, but I can't interfere in their private affairs. I'm really worried about my friend since she's all alone. I don't even know if she can have a lover. Look, why don't you offer her my candidacy? I'd love to be the Countess's lover, Edward said with a sly smile. The maid handed Louise an envelope. Dear Louise, your question took me by surprise. I have been thinking about it all night. I know a man who would be perfect for you. Would you like to meet him? Maxian wrote in his letter, I have been very bored lately. Since returning from perils, I've done all the work on the estates, and I was going to follow the Cloet family anyway, Edward admitted. But it could be dangerous. If you become the Countess's lover, you could be followed as well, Maxian warned. Edward promised him to be extremely careful. But you remember that this time you were betrayed by a man you never expected to stab you in the back, Maxian reminded him. I'd rather be your friend's lover than some unknown gigolo, grumbled the Archduke. Maxian advised his friend to go to the Dolores Motel. The best gigolo in town named Elysian lived there. I wonder how my friend knows about the best gigolos in town, Louise wondered. The girl threw the letter she had read into the fire. There was no retreating now. It was necessary to go to the motel. And she didn't come today either. I've been in this motel for days now. Why am I doing this? Edward muttered to himself. Edward had first heard of the Countess 3 years ago. He had heard a rumor that Count Laird had married a beautiful girl. No one knew what family she was from. The girl was a complete mystery to those around her. One day, Edward noticed Louise treating herself to a cake at one of the banquets. Her behavior shocked those present. Every member of the nobility knew that food at such receptions was only a decoration. The pampered nobles never ate. At first, Edward was very interested in the girl. She seemed unusual and direct to him. Over time, he began to notice that the girl was uncomfortable at parties and banquets, so his interest quickly faded. Edward decided to himself that the girl was boring and uninteresting, so she still couldn't find friends and buddies. After a while, the Archduke forgot about the Countess altogether. I never thought I'd be waiting for her for days in a motel. Life is a funny thing, after all. Your Excellency, may I pour you another cup of tea? The girl's secretary asked. She was surprised that the Archduke had been waiting for someone at the motel for days. The girl was worried that there would be some gossip about the Archduke in the capital again. The Archduke never got involved in love scandals, but there were always gossip and rumors around him. Recently, society was stirred up by the fact that he had returned from the forest of death alive and unharmed. People were saying that he possessed black magic. There was also a rumor in the capital that the Archduke was afraid of women and had strange preferences in bed. Now he spent days in a motel with a mask on his face. And if anyone found out about it, there would be fresh gossip again. The Countess entered the room. The girl's secretary gasped in surprise. She recognized the Countess. The Archduke asked the secretary to keep her mouth shut. Countess, what brings you here? Has your husband begun to cheat on you? Or have your nights with him grown boring?" Edward did his best to add an appealing huskiness to his voice. "I want to have a lover," Louise admitted. She didn't recognize the Archduke in the gigolo. "And what good would that do me?" asked Edward. The girl promised to pay him generously for his labor. "That is not enough. I want something more." Edward leaned over the girl and looked into her eyes. "I think I've seen this man somewhere before. I've definitely met this gigolo before. Or am I confusing things?" Louise thought to herself in surprise. "Tell me what you want me to do. I'll listen to any offer you make," Louise said in a confident tone. The Archduke removed the mask from his face and looked at the girl carefully. "Forgive my rudeness. I did not know it was you," Louise exclaimed. She looked hopefully at the front door. Maybe she should run away from here after all? Had Maxian really set her up? Had this all been planned in advance? Louise wanted to leave, but the Archduke stopped her. "Don't be in a hurry to leave. The fun is about to begin. You won't have this much fun for a while yet. I promise you won't be bored, and I'm sure I'm the only one who can help you with your question. And, to be honest, I didn't expect the Countess to like to frolic in brothels. I am not here to frolic. I came here to find a lover," the girl exclaimed. "Countess, I will be your lover. What do you think of that?" asked the Archduke. "Your Excellency, I did not come here to joke." Louise was indignant. Edward hastened to assure her that he was speaking seriously. "All right, it's settled. Be my lover," said Louise and held out her hand to the Archduke. "I promise you that as long as I am your lover, I will do absolutely everything for you." Edward kissed the girl's hand gently. "I still can't calm down. And why did I just do that? Now I have some strange feeling inside of me." Louise thought wistfully. "Layard himself has advised me several times to take a lover, but I keep feeling that I'm doing the wrong thing. I keep feeling like I'm cheating on my husband." Going down the hall, Louise saw her spouse. "It's a lovely evening tonight. Have you noticed how bright the moon is? Would you care to join me for some wine?" Smiling, Layard asked. "Once upon a time, a long time ago, I fell in love with that smile. It even saved my life. Unfortunately, you can't turn back time. If only I could, I would change my fate." Louise thought to herself. "I remember that Layard warned me that if I meddled in his personal life, he would divorce me. I never crossed him and tried not to pry into his life. But what am I supposed to talk to him about now? I can't tell him that I managed to find a lover today. If I talk to him about other men, our relationship will definitely end. All I have to do is pretend it's not happening." "That's a great idea. I'd love to have wine with you. I also suggest we take a walk around the estate before we go to bed." Smiling gently at her spouse, the girl said. The next day, Louise brought Edward the contract, which surprised him. "Why do we need a contract?" asked the Archduke. "To be honest, I don't know what I want a lover for, and I have no idea what to do with him. You and I need to spell everything out carefully. For example, we need to discuss how we will behave in front of other people. It's not like we can pretend we're a couple." "But lovers agree on that verbally, not draw up a contract with many clauses." The Archduke was indignant. "I would not like to call us lovers. In my mind, lovers are unscrupulous people who cheat on their partners, but mistakenly believe they are perfect lovers," Louise confessed. "I propose that you be fake lovers. We'll make a contract, discuss all the clauses, and honor them in the future. But I want to remind you that I am an unusual lover. I am the most famous man in the capital. I am Archduke Edward von Lindemann." Edward winked slyly at the girl. "Then why such a famous man agreed to be my lover?" Louise asked. Edward answered her that he likes to frolic. He found the whole situation extremely amusing. Edward took the contract from the table and scrutinized it. If this contract was so important to Louise, he wouldn't leave it out. And on top of that, he was curious as to what was written in these documents. "You know, I was amused by one clause. You insist that if either of us develop a liking for any other person, that our relationship will immediately be terminated. Are you thinking about the fact that you might meet your love? Asked Edward. Honestly, I've never wanted to have a lover. I consider it mean to my husband. It's my spouse who insists on having another man in my life, Louise admitted. Edward glared at the girl. Still, she was pretty strong for reacting so calmly to her spouse's suggestion. To be honest, I want my spouse to realize how unpleasant I can be at times. I notice how at ease he is with other girls, and I hope you will help me punish my husband. Edward had recently heard a rumor that the Earl of Cloat had a new mistress, Liliana de Heliod, a rising star in Soviet circles. The other day, she decided to give a banquet. But unless you've decided to start a fight, I suggest we strike first. We'll start small. Only I warn you in advance, we should not fall in love with each other. It's not likely to lead to anything good. Edward said to the girl, No, I will never fall in love with you, I'm sure of it. You may be pursuing your own interest right now, or you may think this is a joke to you, but this is very serious to me, Louise assured the Archduke. You must have misunderstood me. I was just talking about how we shouldn't fall in love. We should only be wagering a couple in love, said Edward. Okay, I'll try to pretend that I like you, promised the girl. I think it wouldn't hurt if you and I practiced in front of the mirror a few times. Try to work up a loving look, the Archduke advised. A little while later, Maxian entered the Archduke's office. He told him that movement had been noticed on the Emperor's side. The Imperial Palace was preparing for a fencing competition. It has been reported to me that the Emperor is going to invite you to the event, and I think it's an excuse to evaluate your skills. But we just returned from an expedition a few days ago, didn't we? He is giving us absolutely no opportunity to rest. But his intentions are obvious. He probably wants to force me to leave the capital, or he plans to do me harm, Edward muttered. I want to warn you that knights from noble families are flocking to the capital from all over the empire. There is talk that this contest will be won by whoever manages to come out of the fight alive, Maxian warned. The Emperor has promised that the winner will receive the Sword of Lencia. Rumor has it that he plans to present it personally. Apparently, my half-brother has lost his mind completely since he decided to give away the Emperor's treasures. I need to prepare for this event. I can't let a treasure like Lencia's sword fall into the wrong hands, said Edward, and smiled slyly. Maxian, you need to find me a good fencing teacher. I know a man who is skillful with a sword. I have yet to defeat him. I will introduce him to you soon, Maxian promised. As for Louise, do you know if she has any unusual preferences? She told me today that she would never fall in love with me for anything. Isn't that strange? I never thought there was a girl in the world willing to say no to me. Edward grumbled in a dissatisfied tone. After the visit to the Archduke's estate, Louise began to feel uncomfortable around her husband Layard. It began to seem to the girl that he was guessing that she was seeing Edward. Well, we finally made it to the Heliod family's estate, said Layard to his spouse. Layard, welcome. I'm glad you accepted my invitation. While I was preparing for the banquet, I kept thinking of you. I'm glad to see you in my home. Liliana exclaimed joyfully. Louise, stay here and I'll go and say hello to those present at the banquet, said Layard and left with Liliana. My goodness, I was surprised to see that they did come here. I can't imagine how it occurred to her to show up at her husband's mistress's banquet. She has no dignity at all. The noble ladies whispered among themselves. And this is just the beginning. They will only speak worse of me from here on, Louise remarked to herself. Your husband ran away from you quickly, after all, Edward remarked as he approached. The Archduke handed Louise a glass of wine. I hope you have practiced well in front of the mirror. Then let us proceed with our plan. Don't worry, we will succeed. The main thing is to stay by my side at all times. Okay, Louise said, and pretended as if she accidentally dropped her glass. By doing so, she attracted everyone's attention. Lady Louise, are you all right? The Archduke asked in an agitated voice. Your Excellency, Thank you for your support." In an embarrassed voice, Louise muttered, "Fortunately, you are not injured. It's dangerous for you to be here. Follow me." The Archduke took the girl's hand and led the way. "Didn't that look a little too playful?" Louise asked. "No. Everything looks just terrific. You'll notice that the eyes of everyone present are turned only in our direction, and I think your husband has noticed it too." A short while later, Edward asked Louise to dance. "You have noticed, Archduke Lindemann has asked your consort to dance." Liliana was surprised. The Count looked at his consort irritably. Whispers could be heard everywhere. The aristocrats whispered that the Archduke and the Countess were spending a lot of time together. Those present at the banquet enjoyed watching the Count and Countess twirl in a dance not with each other, but with completely different people. "Your Highness, I feel like some kind of a sketch comedian right now," Louise admitted. "Enjoy the moment. When else will you be able to show off in front of such a crowd? You have to entertain the audience properly. Everyone understands what the first dance is for. Who do you think dances to a tune like that?" said Edward to the girl. "You will notice that you and I are now very close to each other. This dance was made for lovers. Try not to look around at the other couples and look me in the eye. I want to confess that at the moment, I am uncomfortable with you. I'm uncomfortable making eye contact with you for extended periods of time," said Louise and looked away. "Would you like me to tell you something funny? I think you will find it quite entertaining. I have noticed that the Count has reacted very strangely to our interactions. He keeps looking at us. He's probably jealous. That's what you wanted, isn't it?" Edward asked. "Even though the music is over, I suggest you play to the end." Layard noticed the Archduke taking his consort somewhere. The Count grabbed Liliana's hand and hurried to follow the Archduke. Turning around, Layard finally saw his consort. She was standing on the balcony with the Archduke. On the girl's shoulders was his coat. Suddenly, the Archduke embraced the girl and drew her to him. The Archduke kissed Louise on the forehead. "Liliana, I can't go on like this. I'm looking forward to our first night," said the Count and drew the girl to him. The Count kissed Liliana passionately on the lips. Layard really hoped that his spouse would still see this kiss. "It smells like roses. It's the smell of high-quality oils," noted Louise to herself. "And how did Layard react to all this? Do you think he will change his attitude towards me?" Louise asked the Archduke. "Well, judging by his reaction, it was a success." Edward decided not to tell the girl that he saw her spouse kissing another. "I wonder if Louise would want to see what her husband is doing right now. I mean, he's acting like that in front of his wife on purpose. Why is he doing this? And why is Louise so devoted to such a scoundrel?" Edward thought to himself. "Now I need to step away for a while. I must kiss your hand before I go," Edward warned the girl. The Archduke pulled the glove off Louise's hand with his teeth. "Hey, what is he doing now?" the girl thought fearfully. The Archduke took Louise's hand and kissed her wrist. "No, I shouldn't react like this. What is going on right now? Why did my heart start beating so fast?" Louise wondered. The Count saw the Archduke kissing his consort's hand. "Liliana, let us go to your chambers. We cannot stay here." Layard put his arm around Liliana's shoulders and led her into the house. "That's it, he's gone," Edward stated. "If this happens again, I definitely can't take it," Louise admitted. "It's all right. There isn't a girl in all of high society who is indifferent to me. I know what I'm doing," Edward exclaimed smugly. Louise knew that the Archduke was telling the truth. When he was heir to the throne, all the girls in the Empire had been enamored of him. Each one dreamed of becoming his consort, but the Archduke kept postponing the engagement. Now Edward was not the heir to the throne, but the girls still dreamed of marrying him. And it is not surprising, because he is not only rich, but also handsome. In the entire empire, there was no man more handsome than him. "Louise, from this day forward, you may call me by my first name. After all, today we have made our relationship official," said Edward to the girl. That evening, Louise returned home in Edward's carriage. Layard did not come home at all. Only a few days later, the Earl appeared on the threshold of his house. He embraced his wife and complained to her that he was very tired. Layard carefully pretended that nothing was happening. For several days in a row, the newspapers had been full of information that Archduke Lindemann had started dating Countess Cloette. Edward, have you seen, for 10 days in a row, the newspapers have been discussing your liaison with the Countess, said Maxian, entering his buddy's room. Perhaps I have changed for the worse. I was extremely polite and courteous to the Countess, but she doesn't seem to like me one bit, grumbled the Archduke, dropping tiredly into a chair. Do not be disheartened. I have not come to you empty-handed. I have brought a letter from Louise, said Maxian, and handed his buddy the envelope. As expected, mumbled Edward, and asked Maxian for a writing utensil. The Archduke decided to write a reply. Maxian, that was a great idea after all, although you have no idea how embarrassed I was when the gigolo took off his mask, and I realized it was the Archduke, Louise complained. I know I didn't act entirely fair to you. I should have warned you beforehand, but I didn't know how you would react to what I said. I'm sorry. I did wrong. Maxian muttered guiltily. Okay, apology accepted, but from now on be honest with me, asked Louise. I know you're worried about me. You probably think I'm going to make a mess of things, and I know that going looking for a gigolo wasn't the best idea. If things had been the way they were, I would have come straight to you for advice. I guess getting into this society has made me more boring. Louise, you shouldn't speak ill of yourself. You're actually a very strong girl. Maxian decided to cheer up his friend. He could see that she was upset about something, most likely worried about the situation with her husband. I, too, once considered myself a strong person, but I was young and naive then. In those days, I had nothing to fear. Then I got here and realized that in this world, I am not capable of anything. In this society, I am weak, Louise confessed. Louise, don't you want to teach one person how to swordsmanship? Maxian asked the girl. Don't speak so loudly. No one here knows that I know how to fence. I keep it a secret. Not even my husband knows about it. He piously believes I'm just an ordinary girl from the village. Louise looked around fearfully. She really hoped that no one had heard their conversation. My mom also advised me not to tell anyone about my skill. I completely agree with her. It would be nice if no one knew about it. But if you ever change your mind and want to practice fencing again, come see me. Right now, I live in the annex of the Archduke's estate. There's a training ground next to my house. No one will interfere with us, Maxian assured the girl. Can I go to you right now? Louise asked. She was glad to hear that she would get to hold a sword in her hands again. Louise, I'm sorry that we'll have to go on horseback. I hope you're comfortable, said Maxian to the girl. You don't have to worry about that. I'm quite comfortable. And maybe it is for the best that we are traveling on horseback and not in a carriage. Maybe word will get to my husband that I have another lover besides the Archduke. Louise replied. Maxian led Louise to the training ground. Over there, you can take absolutely any sword you want. Maxian pointed to a stand of swords. The swords were made of wood and were training swords. Louise snatched up the sword and swung it in the air. The last time she had held a sword in her hands was about 4 years ago. Maxian, you didn't just bring up fencing, am I right? You thought it all out carefully and lured me here on purpose. You knew that picking up a sword might change my mind about becoming a mentor. Louise guessed. No, you didn't. I just wanted to see the smile on your face again. I know you used to really like fencing. And yes, you're right. I do want you to help someone, Maxian admitted. You want me to teach Edward fencing? Louise asked. Maxian noted to himself in surprise that the girl had started calling the Archduke by his first name. You don't have to worry. No one will know you are the Archduke's mentor, Maxian promised. Can't Edward swordsmanship since he required a teacher? I remember the first time I met him. There was a deep cut on his shoulder. If I hadn't dressed the wound, he would have died from blood loss. Could Edward be threatened by someone? Louise thought. All right, I'll teach the Archduke how to swordsmanship, but I have conditions. He has to help me with something too, exclaimed the girl. I've brought a swordsmanship teacher to the manor. Your future mentor said that you will have your first lesson on the training ground closer to sunset. I would like to point out that this man was not easy for me to convince," said Maxian to Edward. "It's certainly unexpected. Good thing there's nothing on the schedule. Well, since he is a talented man, he is worth listening to. Did Louise respond to you?" Edward asked. "She said she would personally give you the letter," replied Maxian. "By the way, Edward, can I borrow something from your closet?" asked Maxian. Edward reminded him that he could take whatever he wanted in this house. Maxion brought Louise the Archduke's pants and shirt. The girl should have changed her clothes. She would be uncomfortable fencing in a dress. "I realize these things are big on you, but there is no other option at the moment. I promise I'll buy more appropriate things for you next time," Maxian promised. "Now show me if you haven't lost your skill." Maxian held out a practice sword to the girl. "To be honest, I'm excited. It's been a while since I've been to Perils," Louise exclaimed and assumed a fighting stance. Making a dash, the girl rushed at Maxian. Maxian managed to fend off the first blow. "Maxian, you're getting much better with your sword," Louise praised. Louise lunged at Maxian again. He was able to fend off her blow again. "You know, and you're much better with a sword than you were 10 years ago," noted Louise. "Thanks for the compliment. It's a shame I never got a chance to attack you. I only fended off your blows," replied Maxian. "You know, for a second I thought I was back in my youth. It felt like what was happening to me at the moment was a lie." Louise confessed to her mate. "Sure, you're good with a sword, but not perfect. How did you manage to survive in the forest?" "I can't answer that question for you. One thing I know for sure, the forest has become somehow strange. It's no longer the perils you remember," replied Maxian to the girl. "Once upon a time, I left the forest myself. Back then, I sought the light. Now the old forest can no longer be returned. And even if I return there, it is unlikely that I will be able to change anything. I can only hope that nothing bad will happen." Louise thought to herself. When the Archduke arrived at the training ground, he saw a petite, blonde-haired girl wearing a black mask. "You seem to be disappointed that I'm a girl," said Louise in a slightly changed voice. "No, what makes you think that?" replied Edward. He trusted his buddy Maxian. If he said he was a good teacher, then he could be trusted. "So what am I supposed to do next? Keep pretending I don't recognize her?" The Archduke thought to himself as he looked at the girl. He realized at once that the Countess was in front of him. "You have a terrible rack," Louise remarked. "All right, let's see what you can do. We need to determine what you're not very good at. Try attacking me now." Edward looked at his mate doomfully. He never thought he would ever have the chance to fight a girl. Maxian held a finger up, indicating that everything was fine. One must do as the girl commanded. "What are you guys standing still for? Come on, attack me!" demanded Louise. "Right now, you're even holding your sword incorrectly. Why do you keep ignoring me?" The girl put her sword to the Archduke's throat. "If you're worried about me, then don't be. I'm sure I'll dodge all of your blows." The Archduke attacked Louise rather hesitantly. The girl had no trouble repelling his blow. "Quickly, attack me again. Try to touch my sword just once, and then I will remove the mask from my face," Louise ordered. I was afraid of hurting Louise, so I gave in to her. But since she insists, I will act differently. We need to get this over with as soon as possible. If our training takes too long, the girl will get tired. Edward thought to himself. No matter how many times Edward attacked Louise, she still managed to dodge him. Sometimes he felt as if he was missing his target on purpose. Dusk began to fall on the training ground. The Archduke realized that he was very tired. "Since you can't fight anymore, we can disperse." With a heavy sigh, Louise said, "Your Excellency, when will you pull yourself together already?" Louise removed the mask from her face. I didn't realize the Countess was so good at fencing, and I would like you to continue to be my teacher," said Edward to the girl. "Aren't you even surprised to see me in front of you?" the girl asked in an offended voice. "Did you really think I wouldn't recognize you? I apologize for not taking our training seriously at first." I thought it was your revenge for the motel, replied the Archduke. The Count has such a lovely wife, and yet he still goes out on the side. Could he be out of his mind? Or does he have multiple lives? Has resurrection by magic become possible after all? Maybe he thinks he will live forever. The Archduke wondered. Countess, does your husband know about your skills? Edward asked the girl. Louise had to admit to him that she had not told her husband about her fencing skills. Now tell me, why are you hiding it from him? I have no particular reason to do so. I didn't originally intend to hide anything. We didn't get married because we knew each other well. Layard wanted a comfortable wife, and I aspired to a different life. Louise confessed. Once I became a noblewoman, I lost the need to pick up a sword, but I turned out to be far from the kind of wife my husband wanted. That is the reason I am here. Only Maxian knew of my skill, and now you. I hope you will keep it a secret. I do not wish for others to know about it. Also, last time I healed you, I also asked you to keep quiet about what happened. I hope you remember that. For 10 days, Louise went daily to see the Archduke. A rumor spread through the capital of their secret meetings. One day, Layard returned home very drunk. He confessed to his wife that he had broken up with Liliana. Layard suddenly realized that they weren't right for each other. Do you think the Archduke is right for you? Layard asked his consort. Why are you keeping quiet? You've been going to see him a lot lately. I'm warning you, that man is dangerous. All in all, do whatever you want. Look, let's finally get outside my estate. I suggest you go on a date, said Edward to the girl. Don't forget that we are playing the role of lovers. Of course it's great that you come to my place every day, but we need to go out at least once in a while. Okay, we'll go out with you, but don't think you're going to be able to avoid practicing in the future. Stop thinking about sneaking out of practice. You still have a lot to learn, Louise warned. Walking through the main streets of the capital, Edward and Louise saw on a bulletin board the official information about the upcoming fencing competition. Look at that! There will be an oracle at the ceremony. The imperial family hasn't announced him in years. He was last seen many years ago, noted the Archduke. Will the winner really be presented with the sword of Lencia? Louise wondered. She had only read about this sword in books. She knew that the sword was an imperial treasure. Edward, can anyone participate in the competition? Louise asked the Archduke as they walked back to the manor. And do you really want to participate? Asked Edward. The girl answered him that she was interested out of mere curiosity. Yes, anyone can participate. There are no restrictions on gender or status. People from all over the empire will come to this competition, but it's not that simple here. The society will be very excited if the Countess performs in the competition, Edward said thoughtfully. Well, my muscles are going to be sore for days after this training, Edward grumbled, kneading his shoulders. Why did Louise ask about the contest? Maybe she's interested in Lencia's sword. It's been written about by many people. I remember I once promised that I would make his name famous. When Edward was young, Lencia became his fencing teacher. Edward admired her at a young age as she was called the Dragon Slayer. Edward didn't like the fact that Lencia made him repeat the same boring moves over and over again. For that reason, the boy didn't like fencing lessons. Your Highness, what do you need fencing for? Lencia once asked. I'm the heir, of course I have to learn how to hold a sword. Can a prince not know the basics? Yes, I don't want to learn, but it is my duty, replied Edward. Lencia told the boy that if he didn't want to do something, there was no need to force himself, for there were many other things in the world that could be learned as well. Lencia, what if all of a sudden my father finds out that we are skipping practice? He will kick you out. What will you do then? Edward asked. I'm even better off if he kicks me out. You see, I haven't been home in over a month. My husband and child are waiting for me, replied Lencia. Can you promise me something? If you ever meet my daughter, make sure you take care of her. But don't bother her if she minds. My daughter is very much like me. What will happen if you suddenly fall in love with her beauty? I don't even know why, but I have to keep the promise I once made to Lencia regarding her daughter. Since Louise is interested in fencing, it will be good if she does meet Lencia. I think they will find some common topics to talk about. Louise, try to put a smile on your face, the Archduke asked the girl. Your Grace Archduke Linderman, Lady Cloette. You are so famous lately. From now on, we wish to look not only at your backs, we wish to see your happy faces, the noble ladies exclaimed joyfully. Excuse us, we have to go, Edward said to the girls with a smile. I feel like I've greeted 100 people tonight. It's all making my head spin. Also, I've been getting dozens of invitations lately, Louise complained. The girl suggested that the Archduke take a walk in the garden. In the garden, they met several couples in love. It turned out to be a place for romantic encounters. I wonder if my spouse has been to places like this. Does he often walk around places where romantic meetings take place? Today, he came to the ball with his new mistress, and he didn't look at me once. With sadness, Louise thought to herself, I still expect him to show some jealousy, but he seems to be preoccupied with his new mistress. What a fool I am to expect him to react in any way. Archduke, Louise, it's a pleasure to meet you here. Louise, I did not greet you today as I was not in the mood again. Now, however, we have greeted each other properly, said Layard approached, his new mistress holding him under his arm. Oh, Mistress Cloette, I was going to come to Layard's house this week at his invitation. Perhaps we could dine together? I'm sure you and I will see each other quite often in the future. Layard's new mistress exclaimed. Why the hell is the woman who became my husband's mistress acting like this? Does she really want to provoke me? Could it be that they're just probing the ground? I don't want any more part of this. Louise thought to herself. Her heart was screaming in pain. That's a great idea. Let's all have dinner together, Edward encouraged. You and I will have a double date. Layard's new mistress rejoiced. Yes, that's a great idea. I suggest we have dinner as early as this Sunday. And yes, Edward will be a frequent guest in our home from now on, Louise exclaimed. Good. Let's all have dinner together at our estate. Louise, I'll see you this weekend since I'm not sure I'll be coming home any time soon, said Louise to her spouse. Louise, that was a good counterattack. I didn't expect that from you. You did well, praised the girl Edward. Thanks for your help. I'm still worried. To be honest, I'm scared to even think about my husband's mistress coming to our house to spend the night with him. It would be quite hard for me to bear such an atmosphere, the girl confessed. Your life is a melodrama, but if you want, we can do the same. We'll spend the night together, too, suggested Edward. At first, I was very surprised when I found out you two were dating. The Archduke has never had a single scandal involving girls, and I had no idea that I would fall so deeply in love with the Count. You can probably understand my feelings. Layard's mistress chattered breathlessly. I would like to point out that you two are a perfect match. And don't be surprised by my words, for you can always tell from the outside. Archduke, you were once interested in our garden, but it is raining heavily today, so it will be a cumbersome walk, said Edward to the Count. That's all right. I will visit it on my next visit. You will invite me again, won't you, Count? Asked Edward. And, by the way, why would I need a garden when I have such a beautiful woman like Louise sitting next to me? Ah, Edward, you don't realize what you are missing. The scarlet roses have recently bloomed in the garden. They remind me of the color of your eyes. Whenever I tend those roses, I think of you. Louise decided to play along with the Archduke. Well, since these roses remind you of me, then name their variety. I will plant some of them in my garden. I want to think of you, too, by caring for a flower like this, replied the Archduke to the girl. It's getting dark. We should go to the bedroom, said Layard. I thought I could pretend I didn't notice anything, but I'm no good at it, thought Louise. The Archduke noticed that the girl was upset, so he squeezed her hand encouragingly. That's a good suggestion. It's time for us to go, too. Please escort me to your bedroom, asked the Archduke to Louise. Of course it was difficult, but thanks to Edward, I was able to hold out. It's nice to know that there is someone in the next room who is on my side, thought to herself Louise. Walking over to the window, the girl saw her husband's bedroom windows. He was kissing his mistress passionately. Louise pulled the curtains tightly. When Louise had first arrived at the Count's estate, she had loved those big, bright windows. They were different from what they had been in her own home. During a clear day, the room was filled with sunlight, which lifted the girl's spirits. Although her marriage to Layard was arranged, the girl still hoped for a bright future. She was sure that it would work out. They would end up loving each other. Edward peeked into Louise's room. I didn't expect to have such a hard time sleeping in a place I'm unfamiliar with. If you're not thinking about sleeping, I'd like to spend this time together. But it's late at night. I wouldn't want to entertain you tonight, grumbled Louise. But we will have to spend this night together as we are lovers. I have noticed that the servants of this estate keep a close eye on me. It must be remembered that I came to this house as your lover, Edward insisted. Eventually, Louise gave in and invited the Archduke into her room. Louise, answer me. Am I just a tool that you're going to use to change your husband's heart? Asked Edward to the girl. Lately, I've been considering you as my friend, replied Louise. I know you don't avoid your friends in that way. I saw you holding Maxian's hands, said the Archduke. If you and I get too close, I will think we are really having an affair. And if my husband at least comes to his senses now, I think we'll have things back to normal. Without looking at the Archduke, Louise replied, But there is absolutely no guarantee that your husband will change after all. You are beginning to realize that yourself. Edward exclaimed, You may be right, but I like to think of you and Maxion as my friends. I'm quite content with that now, too, Louise admitted. Have you ever thought about the fact that this very night your spouse will want to come to your bedroom? Asked Edward to the girl. That's not going to happen. Layard and I have never spent a single night together. I think it's all because he doesn't like me, Louise replied. Edward, please close your eyes, Louise asked. When Edward closed his eyes, the girl turned her back to him and took off her robe. She asked Edward to touch her back. It turned out that the girl had deep scars on her back. Layard saw those scars once and never touched me again. I guess I tried to be too happy, so I became a spoiled flower for him. In a sad voice, Louise said, Louise, don't say that. You are far from spoiled and imperfect, said Edward to the girl. You don't need to comfort me. It's okay. I'm used to my body and my situation by now. Louise didn't want anyone to feel sorry for her. Once upon a time, my surroundings were overflowing with beautiful things. Ever since I was a child, I loved beauty and aesthetics. All the people and objects around me were beautiful, Edward admitted. Some people said that I might grow up to be a bully, but they were just expressing their concern. After I grew older, it was corrected naturally. Edward picked up Louise's robe from the floor and handed it to the girl. I would like to point out that as time went on, I began to notice that my standards became too high. I stopped being interested in mediocre beauty. After becoming an adult, the only beauty I thought about was you. But there are plenty of beautiful things in the world. You must have been looking inattentively. If you look clearly at my wounds, you'll find me hideous. You won't want to touch me, Louise said with sadness in her voice. I'm sure I won't be able to touch you only when you forbid me to do so, said Edward to the girl. In addition to your outer beauty, you also have an inner beauty. I admire your skill with a sword. I know many knights who can't beat you, and I'm not saying that to comfort you. I sincerely feel that way. Thank you for your kind words. I think it's time for you to go back to your room. The servants by now must think we have spent some time with you, said Louise to Edward. Back in his room, Edward took a few sips from the bottle that was on his bedside table. What's happening to me? Has my condition worsened? Or am I crazy? I think I'm going to have a hard time sleeping tonight, Edward thought, pressing his hand against his racing heart. Good thing it's a clear day. We can finally walk around the garden with you, said Edward to the girl. Are those beautiful roses you were talking about yesterday? Do they really remind you of the color of my eyes? No, they don't resemble your eyes. I just said what first popped into my head, replied Louise. Can we call it a day after all? I would like to point out that your sword skills have improved greatly, said his buddy Maxion. Completely agree with you. I can feel it too, replied Edward. I told you that Louise is a capable teacher. When I was young, I too was tutored by her on days when my teacher was busy. Narrated Maxian. And what makes you think that today's training is over? From today onwards, we will be fighting with real swords. There's a swordsman competition coming up soon. We need to be ready, said Louise, who walked over. Louise, why did you come so early? I thought you were going straight to the banquet with the Archduke. Layard wondered. I came to change my dress, replied the girl. Then change your clothes and come down here. It's been a long time since we've been together. Let's go to this banquet together. By the way, Louise, I want to notice that you seem happy these last few days. On the way to the banquet, Louise gave her husband a sneaky glance. Edward had told her a few hours ago that her husband's mistress would be proposed to today. She wondered if Layard knew about it. Louise, have a good time. I'll see you later at the manor, said Layard as they got out of the carriage. Layard, call me if you need me. Something bad might happen today, Louise asked her husband. If you're talking about Iscilla's proposal now, I already know about it. The proposal will be made by the second son of the Rivault family, and there is no need to make that face. Yes, she was my lover, and we enjoyed each other for a while. Louise, even if it seems to you that my mistresses are eager to take your place, they won't succeed, and they are well aware of that. No one can be a real wife like you. Fun is just a dream, but marriage is reality. Even if I wander for a while, I always have a reason to come home. You have fun tonight, too, because when the sun rises, the dream will end. Layard turned away from his spouse and headed for the banquet. What did I expect him to do anyway? Why am I still holding on to him? What do I regret? Louise thought wistfully as she looked at the back of the departing Layard. Louise, you're early today, Edward remarked as he approached. Could it be that Layard was telling the truth about the dream? Ever since Edward came into my life, it's been like a beautiful dream. I've picked up the sword I let go of years ago. Louise thought to herself. Every day has become full, as if I had been compensated for the days I spent alone. Edward is a man who would rather appear in a dream than in reality. What if it really is just a passing dream? Louise, is something wrong? Why are you staring at me so intently? Asked Edward, leaning over the girl. No, nothing, the girl mumbled embarrassedly. Well, let's go inside then. We'll take seats until the guests arrive, suggested Edward. Get out! Stay away from me! It's over between us! I'm seeing someone else! An irritated Iscilla popped out from around the corner of the manor. She was followed by a worried young man. You don't need to tell me anything. I heard you say yourself that you don't see me as a woman. Look at that! These are the main participants in today's marriage proposal. The atmosphere is not at all suitable for calling someone to marry. They clearly have something going on, Edward remarked. Why did you come to me now? I don't have any free time to argue with you, Iscilla exclaimed. I want to explain myself to you. It was a normal fight between academy classmates. If I had spoken out about you, obviously they would have started bad conversations, explained Iscilla to her fiancé. That's why I spoke ill of the marriage. I didn't really mean to criticize you. If you want, I won't see those people anymore. Tales, do you know the reason why Layard is wildly favored by women? Iscilla asked. At the very least, he is courteous, and always says what a woman wants to hear at the moment. All I ask of you is basic courtesy. I want to have the illusion of a pleasant experience in which my partner at least pretends to be courteous to me. But, Iscilla, have you forgotten that he is a married man? Do you think you could be truly happy around an earl? Talus asked. I realize myself that what's going on right now can hardly be called love. But why do you bring it up? You are not as sweet to me as that adulterous man, the Count, Iscilla exclaimed. You couldn't even tell your friends at the academy that you have a lover. Suddenly, Talus went down on one knee before Iscilla and offered the girl to marry him. I swear I will never hurt you like this again. Are you being sincere now? You know what I am. I'm just an immoral woman. If we get married, people will talk about it for a while. What will your classmates from the academy say? Without looking at her fiancé, Isilla asked, "None of that matters to me. Being with you is more important than staying with others," Thalys assured the girl. "Well, there goes the happy ending. Glad they were able to come to an agreement after all," mumbled Edward. Louise sat down on the ground under the tree. She felt miserable. Isilla is right. Layard is courteous and always says what the woman wants to hear at the moment. Edward, am I really that stupid? I feel like I've been hit over the head with a shoe. Even Isilla understands everything, but I don't. Even when I knew the truth about my spouse, I ignored it. I believed that the moment I recognized that Layard's love for me had faded, I would be very hurt. All this time, I have been very foolish. I am still his wife. I thought that if I obeyed him and trusted him, everything would be all right in my life. I always thought that if I didn't notice his cheating, he would eventually appreciate it. To put it bluntly, I continued to abuse myself. My marriage is a complete failure. But you're not God. You can't always make the right choices. Everyone learns by making stupid mistakes. Your choices just led you to pain. I want to assure you that absolutely everyone in the world makes mistakes. Edward began to reassure the girl. "Edward, I doubt you've ever made as stupid a mistake as I have," Louise said, finally smiling. "Louise, I suggest you stay at my estate tonight," Edward said unexpectedly. "Wait, this is too sudden for me. You and I agreed that we were going to have more of a friendly relationship than a romantic one," mumbled Louise. "What are you talking about now? You've got it all wrong. I've been practicing at night lately, but I'm not making much progress. I wanted to ask you to train with me," said Edward to the girl. "Ah, that's what it's about now. Then I agree," Louise said with an embarrassed smile. "Did you really think twice about me suggesting you have a romantic evening? You're more active than I thought you'd be," Edward remarked. "Anyone could have made a mistake. You don't have to mock me. Your offer was ambiguous. And yes, I admit it, I am weird," exclaimed Louise, jumping to her feet. "I will continue to train you since the swordsman competition is only a few days away. You need the training. Now let's go to the banquet hall. The celebration has probably already begun." "It's dark now, of course, but I can't deny you sparring with real swords. It looks like you've been practicing for a long time to agree to this," said Louise, assuming a fighting stance. "I hope you don't kill your apprentice," noted Edward. "Just in case you should tense up. Sure, I can heal ordinary wounds, but I can't reattach severed limbs. Edward, let's drop the idle chatter. Attack me," the girl asked. Edward noticed that when Louise picked up the sword, she stopped completely different. She seemed to regain her former courage and confidence. Louise never used tricks or useless tricks during a fight. Where weight class didn't matter, Louise used speed. She attacked fearlessly and fended off punches with confidence. I wonder when she fell into my heart. Maybe when I saw her for the first time, or when she dressed my wounds, or maybe she fell into my heart after I learned of her swordsmanship skills. Thought to himself, Edward, "I've been watching you for a few minutes now. I've noticed that you can't concentrate on fighting," said Louise, then brought Edward to his senses. "And now you've been watching me too?" Edward finally managed to lunge towards the girl. Edward kicked the girl's legs up and knocked her to the ground. "That's it, I win," whispered Edward. "It won't happen again," Louise assured him, rising to her feet. "You look very upset. You used to be more talkative. What's going on with you?" asked Edward. "Okay, let's forget about it. We both seem to be having trouble concentrating today, so how about we continue tomorrow?" suggested Edward, to which Louise happily agreed. "If the medication is ineffective, it might be worth increasing the dose. I've noticed that you've been having a hard time sleeping lately. You've started to walk at night. The last few days you've been practicing until the wee hours of the morning." In an agitated voice, Benjamin said, "I understand perfectly well that you're doing this to match the Emperor, but for the sake of achieving your goal, you shouldn't ruin your health." "I'm not a small child, so I know what to do on my own," Edward objected. "Since returning from perils, your condition has deteriorated even more. I can't stand idly by and watch you overexert yourself, Benjamin insisted. I'm not sick. I'm just not sleeping well. If anyone hears of my condition, they'll think I'm sick with something fatal. Then again, your constant nagging makes me lose the desire to sleep completely, Edward said in a frustrated tone. Benjamin was not worried about Edward for nothing. 7 years ago, the previous emperor had died under mysterious circumstances. Archduke Edward Linderman himself was regularly assassinated. Benjamin was pained to see Edward suffering. He could see that the emperor had recently become too much of a giver to the archduke. Benjamin was worried that that situation might happen again. I know what you're worried about, but I can handle it myself. You don't need to worry so much. I'm almost ready to fight back, assured Benjamin Edward. Late that evening, Edward knocked on Louise's room. I decided this evening to personally bring you some water, said Edward, entering the girl's room. By the way, I want to treat you to some candy. I'm sure you'll like it. Don't worry, I won't bore you. If you want to be alone, I'll go away. No, I don't mind if you talk to me. And to be honest, when I'm alone and it gets so quiet, I have some unpleasant thoughts. Too much has happened today, so I can't sleep, Louise admitted. Okay, I'll stay with you until you fall asleep, promised Edward. I noticed that this room has been used by someone before. It doesn't look like it was left a long time ago, said Louise, looking around the room. When I first came to this mansion, I lived in this room for a while. At that point, I needed a place to hide. I didn't know then that being around you would make this place seem beautiful, narrated Edward. Come to think of it, there's a lot I don't know about you, Louise. Tell me about yourself. What do you really like? Edward peppered the girl with questions until she fell asleep. He seemed interested in learning absolutely everything about her. When Louise woke up in the morning and she noticed Edward sleeping on the floor, Edward, what do you like? I just now realized that last night I was only talking about myself. I didn't ask you any questions. There's still a lot I don't know about you. The girl gently tucked Edward's hair behind his ear. I like touching him, though, Louise remarked in surprise. Suddenly, Edward opened his eyes and pulled the girl to the floor. Who sent you to me? Edward growled. The girl noticed that his gaze was unfocused. He probably hadn't woken up yet. Edward, calm down, it's me, Louise exclaimed. With a heavy sigh, Edward unconsciously collapsed on top of Louise. Come to think of it, something similar happened during our first meeting. He doesn't seem to let himself relax even when he's unconscious. What kind of life has Edward lived? Louise thought to herself. She tried to get free, but her efforts were unsuccessful. Edward clutched her hand tightly. Louise pulled the blanket off the bed and covered Edward with it. She lay down next to the Archduke and fell asleep. When Edward opened his eyes, he saw Louise sleeping in front of him. And what kind of situation is this? Did we really fall asleep in this position last night? Why is Louise sleeping here and not on the bed? Wondered Edward. Edward, are you awake yet? Louise asked, opening one eye. Edward asked the girl why they were sleeping on the floor. Louise had to tell him what had happened. Louise, you are being extremely careless. What if I had dark intentions? Edward asked. And you don't seem like the type to do me any harm. You're too much of a gentleman for that. Smiling, the girl replied. And what are you two doing here? Asked Maxian, who entered the room. Edward suggested that his buddy meet him in his office. He decided to tell Maxian about his real relationship with Louise. So this is how it turns out, and I thought you two had really become lovers. To be honest, I don't want you to break her heart, Maxian admitted. I think it would be best if Louise and the Count were legally divorced. If we were to carry out our plan, being the Earl's wife would put Louisa in danger, Edward remarked. But the Count won't just divorce her. He brought her to his house for a purpose, too. After a little thought, Maxian said, And I'm going to prepare a decoy for him. I will offer him a thing that will seem desirable to him. But first, I'm going to ask him for a divorce. Edward said in a confident tone. He had a plan that would bring him closer to Louise.